This is our crew patch, and a couple things jump out at you right away, and those are the colors. I was in charge of the patch, and we went about this very democratically. I basically asked the crew what colors they liked. The commander liked purple, and hence purple. That's not exactly true. There also there was a common thread in the orbiter crew, which is represented by the background, and although that may look black, it is actually a navy blue. The different polyhedrons you see on the patch, they represent fire, the basic elements: fire, earth, air, and water. And what we're trying to show here is the space shuttle encompassed by the shape of its patch itself, which is thought to represent the cosmos, a dodecahedron, is the space shuttle doing science on the basic elements. The one symbol that looks like an infinity sign, we refer to that as the Fred Leslie sign. Although the crystal-like looking figures are actually polyhedrons, which in turn represent fluids. We put this other symbol on to emphasize fluids for Fred Leslie on our crew.
Agency NASA has postponed Thursday's launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia after finding a hydrogen leak in its #1 engine. The mission calls for the astronauts to spend 16 days in space, with astronauts conducting a series of experiments on manufacturing materials in space, testing everything from flames to crystals to potato plants. NASA officials tell CNN they expect a delay of at least 1 week.
Caused NASA to postpone this morning's planned liftoff of the Space Shuttle Columbia. The problem was discovered a few hours ago as workers are filling one of the huge external fuel tanks with hydrogen and oxygen. The delay could last a week. This was to have been a 16-day science mission for Columbia's 7-member crew.
The U.S. Space Shuttle Agency, NASA, has postponed the launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia. A potentially dangerous hydrogen leak was found in the shuttle's #1 engine about 5.5 hours before the scheduled blastoff. The astronauts plan to spend 16 days in space conducting a series of experiments related to life on the upcoming International Space Station. NASA officials expect the launch to be delayed by about a week.
Schon wieder wurde ein neuer Hurrikan geboren, und zwar diesmal auf den Namen Noel getauft. Allerdings, zum Glück für die Karibik, ist er hier ziemlich weit im Osten über dem Atlantik entstanden. Und so sieht es derzeit aus, dass er jetzt schon nach Norden abbiegt und somit die Karibik nicht erreichen wird. Allerdings die Schifffahrt über den Weiten des Atlantiks, sie muss ein bisschen in den nächsten Tagen aufpassen. Ihnen noch einen schönen Abend. Vielleicht sehen wir uns morgen wieder. Tschüss.
Tropical Storm Noel, it has weakened from Hurricane Noel, or Noel rather, and the storm is not doing what storms normally do in this part of the world. It is moving towards the northeast as opposed to the west, so it may threaten parts of Europe as we head into the week. A couple of showers, thunderstorms mid-continent and across south, the colder air. North American weather, a couple of features. This front is the main one, bringing showers and thunderstorms along it. Could be some strong thunderstorms with that frontal system, and Tropical Storm Opal will continue to drift to the north, expected to affect the Gulf Coast states of the U.S. sometime the middle of next week.
Check out these images shot from an orbiting space shuttle. It turns out this unique vantage point makes for more than pretty pictures. It makes for some interesting science, as NASA is finding out. A lightning detector launched into orbit in April is now yielding some interesting results. Scientists think they may be able to better predict tornadoes by measuring the frequency of lightning flashes from space. Amorous woodpeckers, singed O-rings, balky generators, a hurricane, and now a leaking valve. Put it all together and you have a short list of NASA's shuttle woes over the past year. On Thursday morning, the space agency had to halt yet another countdown. This one 5 hours before scheduled liftoff. Technicians fueling Columbia noticed hydrogen leaking out of a valve in one of the shuttle's 3 main engines. It will take a week to swap out the offending part. The 7-person crew is slated to spend 16 days in orbit studying the effects of microgravity. It's now been nearly 2 years since the Hubble Space Telescope was outfitted with some high-priced contact lenses. Since the once troubled Hubble started seeing straight, it has helped usher in a golden age of stellar discoveries. But while astronomers have been cheering, the public has been largely unaware of all of this. So now the folks at the Hubble are trying to redouble their efforts to get the word out. Lisa Price reports from the Great Telescope Tour.
Somewhat blurry and abstract, these pictures taken by the Hubble telescope showed the universe as it's never been seen before. The spectators no longer just astronomers, but the public. Many who will for the first time see images direct from Hubble's powerful eye. Here, a comet colliding with Jupiter.
More than an equivalent of 225,000 megatons of TNT have been released by the first fragment's crash.
More dramatic pictures. Stars really being born. Asteroids actually rotating. Black holes with gravity so strong that anything pulled in will never escape, not even light.
I think it's the final piece in a chain of clues that tell us black holes are out there. We've now seen pictures of material swirling around apparently nothingness in space. And so it's just like Einstein said, space can be warped, distorted, and become a black hole.
Astronomers and the public marvel at what they see.
I thought it was astonishing, really, because you don't realize the expanse and the vastness of the universe.
3, 2, 1. And we have liftoff. Liftoff of the Space Shuttle Endeavour on an ambitious mission to service the Hubble Space Telescope.
But the big picture was pretty hazy when the $1.6 billion Space Telescope was first launched in 1990. It didn't work. 3 years later, $629 million was spent to fix it. Now NASA officials reject accusations they are showing off Hubble's pretty pictures in order to restore credibility to the program.
If we inspire, even 10,000 or 100,000 kids to work a little harder, to take science more seriously, school more seriously, that's the real value. That's where the real value is, not just the science.
Rather, the science may come in telling us not just about the past and the present, but the future. These red giant stars, astronomers believe the sun will one day take on a similar shape. It's losing its energy.
The sun is going to swell up into something called a red giant star. It'll get so big it'll swallow up Mercury and Venus, possibly even swallow up or incinerate the Earth.
But astronomers say the Hubble pictures show that big event won't happen for at least another 4 billion years. Lisa Price for CNN, Chicago.
The next Hubble servicing mission is scheduled for February 1997, when the Space Shuttle Discovery will install some upgraded components.
Opal is expected to strengthen, and meteorologists have posted hurricane watches for most coastal regions. At this hour, along the U.S. Gulf Coast, highways are jammed with traffic trying to escape what's being called a monster storm. Hurricane Opal is about to hit land. Well, CNN's John Zarella is there. He joins us on the phone from Pensacola, Florida. John, how bad is it?
Well, Sonia, I think one of the good pieces of news is that monster storm has backed off a little bit in intensity. The wind speeds at one point today, while over the Gulf of Mexico, were at 150 miles an hour sustained. The winds are now down to 125 miles an hour sustained. And I can tell you that here in Pensacola, we are just now approaching hurricane force winds. I can see it's been steadily picking up. The wind is being whipped off the top of the cars parked here at the emergency management headquarters. The trees are bending. We are quickly approaching hurricane force conditions. But at least for now, the storm, it is still the center of it. The strongest part of the storm, still offshore, appears at least to be hopefully in one of what they call a downward phase. They do tend to fluctuate, could still re-intensify again before it actually makes landfall. Earlier today, of course, not quite as bad. The winds, the rain, just sporadic all throughout the day. There was a great deal of anticipation, wonder, when would this nastiest of weather get here? Well, now it is finally arriving on the coast here at Pensacola. In Gulf Shores, Alabama earlier today, same sort of conditions. Squally weather moving through, high wind, rain, but now all along the Florida coast, it appears that we are in for a real major hurricane event here. Because of the fact that this storm is so large, hurricane force winds extend out about 140 miles from the center. So it is a very large storm and, again, a very powerful hurricane.
Küste von Florida eine Massenflucht ausgelöst. Mehr als 100.000 Menschen wollen sich vor den Naturgewalten in Sicherheit bringen. Am frühen Morgen peitschte der Wirbelsturm über die Region östlich von Pensacola mit Spitzengeschwindigkeiten von mehr als 230 Stundenkilometern. Straßen sind überschwemmt, Häuser stehen unter Wasser. Ein Bewohner ertrank. Auf Bitten von Gouverneur Childs hat Präsident Clinton den Notstand verhängt. Opal, der inzwischen Alabama erreicht hat, gilt als einer der schlimmsten Hurricanes, die die Küstenregion seit 1969 heimgesucht haben. Damals hatte der Wirbelsturm Camille die Region verwüstet und 256 Menschen das Leben gekostet.
Sind dem Orkan Opal in Mexiko mindestens 10 Menschen zum Opfer gefallen. Heute fegte er über Alabama und Florida hinweg und nahm Kurs auf Tennessee. Es ist der 3. Hurrikan dieses Jahres, der in den Vereinigten Staaten wütet.
Mit Windgeschwindigkeiten von 230 Stundenkilometern peitschte der Sturm heute über die Küstengebiete hinweg. Dabei kamen mindestens 3 Menschen ums Leben. Etliche Menschen versuchten über die Autobahnen ins Inland zu fliehen. Beamte riefen die Einwohner dazu auf, sich lieber in den Badezimmern zu verschanzen, als auf den Straßen stecken zu bleiben. Die Meteorologen waren nicht davon ausgegangen, dass Opal über dem warmen Golf von Mexiko derart an Stärke zulegen würde.
Opal has now been downgraded to a tropical storm. Uprooted trees and thousands of damaged homes were left in its wake. At least 3 people have been killed, and more than 1 million people lost electrical power in the southern states of Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Hurricane Opal came ashore on Wednesday in Florida along the Gulf of Mexico. CNN's Charles Ewe looks at the impact there.
Damage in the Florida Panhandle is heavy and widespread, but it may be days before the extent of destruction is known. The storm swamped US 98 in the Pensacola-Fort Walton area, leaving behind a wave of debris that included trees, boats, and shattered buildings. The second hurricane to hit the area in 2 months and the 3rd storm in the region since June, Opal packed wind gusts of up to 144 miles an hour when she came ashore. Scores of Gulf-front homes and condos were swamped. There was little time to get out of the way. An estimated 100,000 coastal residents and tourists clogged highways that could not handle the onslaught.
We were looking at, from time to time, looking for gasoline, which it seemed like every gasoline station we got to was just closing up as we got there.
Emergency crews were hard-pressed, too. In Pensacola, as the storm approached, a fire at an old bar was allowed to burn because firefighters were reportedly busy elsewhere. Tens of thousands spent the night in shelters, worried what they will find when they go home.
We're worried about going back home there. We don't think we'll have anything left, so we don't know.
Teams of federal and state emergency workers, along with 3,500 National Guard troops, were moving into hard-hit counties to survey damage.
Please be assured that the Federal Emergency Management Agency will mobilize all necessary resources to help your states recover from the damage. And be assured that the prayers of our entire nation are with you.
Officials say in a year of record hurricane activity, Opal will stand out as one of the worst to hit the Gulf Coast in almost 30 years. Adding insult to injury, another tropical depression has formed in the Atlantic. If it becomes a storm, it will be called Pablo. Charles Ewe, CNN, Navarre, Florida.
Mal der letzte Blick auf den Hurricane Opal, das Bild gestern Nachmittag. Und wenn Sie jetzt den Filmlauf sehen, dann sehen Sie auch, wie schnell sich dieser Sturm weiter ins Landesinnere bewegt hat. Und da wird er dann auch sehr schnell schwächer, weil er keine neue Energie aus dem warmen Golf von Mexiko bekommt. Zum Schluss jetzt noch ein Blick wieder auf den Atlantik. Und da macht sich schon der nächste Wirbelsturm bemerkbar. Und zwar hier auf dem Wege von Afrika Richtung Karibik, die Sie hier gerade noch am Bildrand sehen. Weitere Informationen gibt es darüber noch nicht. Ich verabschiede mich erstmal für heute und wünsche Ihnen noch einen schönen Abend.
U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia. The delay was due to software problems in a command computer. A NASA spokesman said the launch would not take place before Monday. This is the 4th time in just over a week that the mission has been postponed. The shuttle crew is scheduled to stay in space for 16 days and is to conduct a host of laboratory experiments. The mission is seen as another step in preparing the construction of a permanent space station.
Yeah, this is amazing.
In June, scientist William Gray of Colorado State University predicted there would be a dozen named storms this season, 3 of them intense hurricanes. This past week, Gray's prediction of unusually heavy tropical cyclone activity seemed prophetic. Hurricane Opal, which battered the Florida Panhandle, was in fact the 3rd major hurricane and the 15th named storm of the season. Gray makes his predictions by employing a mathematical formula which factors in the relative strength of El Nino, the direction of stratospheric winds, and rainfall in West Africa, among other things. Gray says he always had confidence in his method, skeptics notwithstanding.
We knew in the historical data that this was working in the past data set. So even though you can get an odd year or two when it doesn't work, if we keep applying this and the atmosphere behaves in the future as it has in the past, this is going to work.
For you math majors out there who are just dying to know, here is Gray's formula. I won't attempt to try to explain it to you. After all, I am a new math survivor. As it turns out, that formula may have created a slightly low estimate. On Thursday, Pablo became the 16th named tropical storm of the year. The hurricane season officially begins in June and ends on November 30th.
Eine Woche her, da verließ der letzte Hurrikan die Karibik, Opal genannt. Er zog ja über Florida hinweg. Inzwischen hat sich ein neuer gebildet, Roxane oder Roxane genannt. Sie hat sich hier entwickelt in der Karibik, zieht inzwischen langsam weiter nach Nordwesten, im Moment mit etwa 15 Kilometer in der Stunde. Die Windgeschwindigkeiten aber, mit der sie sich dreht hier, die betragen etwa 130 Kilometer in der Stunde und sie ist noch am Wachsen, das heißt, sie wird noch stärker werden und dann wohl so weiter über die Halbinsel Yucatan in dieser Nacht hinüberziehen. Das war's vom Wetter. Ich wünsche Ihnen noch einen ruhigen Abend und dann bis nächste Woche.
This look at the worldview weather leads off with Hurricane Roxanne bearing down on Cozumel, Mexico. You can see the eye of the storm poised for a direct hit on Cozumel as it moves ever closer. Top wind speeds at 110 miles an hour and gusts greater than that. We are not optimistic at all about the conditions on Cozumel. There could be widespread devastation. As we move on to the latest statistics as of 5 o'clock this afternoon Eastern Time in the United States, it is located at 20.1 north, 86.4 west, and that places the center of the eye about 45 miles to the southeast of Cozumel. However, the eye wall has already been brushing across Cozumel. Top wind speeds, as I said earlier, at 110 miles an hour. It is continuing to move to the west-northwest at 9 miles an hour. It's expected to move right across the Yucatan Peninsula, pop back out into the Gulf of Mexico, and continue on a almost westerly track, slightly north of due west, and expected to move into the east coast of Mexico. It could still turn to the north, but at this time, that is a less likely scenario. Let's move on now, if we can, to our possible track map, as you see here. And now it is the most southerly track that we are showing here that is the most likely scenario that Roxanne may take. Well, tomorrow morning we'll bring a weather map across the United States that looks like this. A little bit of rainfall in the northwest, and rainfall may continue in the state of Florida, where flooding has been a major problem due to an old frontal boundary stalled out in the area. More rain is expected.
Category 1 with sustained winds of 140 to 165 kilometers. Forecasters warn, though, Roxanne might gather more strength in a matter of hours as it moves across the Yucatan Peninsula and back into the Gulf of Campeche. The storm slammed into the peninsula overnight, knocked out phone service and electricity, and tens of thousands of people had to leave their homes.
South and eastern United States watching more heavy rain there across Florida. Flooding problems there. Roxanne we're watching very closely. Could move a little more northerly. The path of the storm is uncertain as of yet. Its intensity presently running about 65 to 70 knots in intensity, just up to hurricane strength. This front comes crashing across the central United States. More snow in the middle U.S. up into Canada for the next couple of days.
Der Sturm über der Halbinsel Yucatan ist zum Glück über Land geblieben, wie wir hier auf dem Loop sehen. Und das bedeutet, dass ihm die Nahrung fehlt. Denn er hat eine einzige Lieblingsspeise und das ist mindestens 27,5 Grad warmes Wasser. Und wenn ihm das entzogen wird, dann geht er innerhalb eines Tages zugrunde und ist jetzt nur noch ein reiner Sturm über Yucatan und wird sich dort auch morgen noch ganz auflösen. Ihnen einen angenehmen Abend. Bis morgen.
Wieder musste die Europäische Raumfahrtorganisation ESA bei ihren Projekten den Rotstift ansetzen. Denn die Mitgliedstaaten klagten über leere Kassen. In einer Woche wollen sie darüber entscheiden, ob sie sich an der geplanten internationalen Raumstation beteiligen. Für die ESA Grund genug, vor einem Nein zu warnen. Die Raumstation, in der Amerikaner, Russen, Japaner und Europäer arbeiten sollen, sei ein Zeichen der Völkerverständigung. Außerdem sei sie wichtig für die Grundlagenforschung und Erdbeobachtung.
Und das auf dem Hintergrund von 5 Milliarden Menschen, die die Erde jetzt bewohnen mit wachsender Tendenz. Das sind Chancen, die gerade rechtzeitig kommen.
Die Raumstation werde die ESA zwar 5,4 Milliarden Mark kosten, Doch sie werde sich ebenso bezahlt machen wie das europäische Trägersystem Ariane. Dieses beherrscht heute 70% des Weltmarktes.
About 370 kilometers east of Tampico, Mexico, moving north with sustained winds near 100 kilometers per hour. Forecasters disagree on whether Roxanne will continue on a northern path towards the United States or turn west, hitting the Mexican coast for the second time this week. Canceled Saturday's launch after engineers found a crack in a test engine. Officials say those problems have been fixed, but now it's bad weather that threatens. NASA is now aiming for Sunday, but forecasters say there's a 70% chance of unfavorable weather. Colombia has been plagued by problems since September, resulting in 5 delays so far.
Launch, but forecasters predict only a 20% chance of favorable weather. Hurricane Opal contributed to the 2-week setback for the shuttle's research mission. If Sunday's liftoff is scrubbed, Colombia would tie its own record of 6 delays.
Well, Roxanne is back, and she's a hurricane again. Ted Texter is here to give us details.
You know, Jill, Roxanne has bounced around quite a bit. It continues to move somewhat easterly now, moving very, very slowly. Wind speeds at 75 miles an hour, so just up to hurricane intensity. Over open water, so conditions are possible. They are favorable for a little more development. In another day or so, it could run into some drier air, so that could perhaps stifle its growth. The coordinates, the position, and we'll watch it very closely. The official track has it going, the official forecast track has it going south or southeast. As the front slides in from the north, well, we think it might continue a little more east or maybe even a little bit north and east. Its movement has been on a heading of about 100 or nearly easterly for the past 12 hours or so. We'll watch it. We will keep you posted. Well updated of what it's going to do, we think. On farther north now, up to the eastern United States, a lot of rain is falling, some of it on the heavy side. The brighter colors show you where the heavier storms are. Down into Florida, where they're trying to get the shuttle off, it has been raining. It will continue to, we think, right on into tomorrow morning. The front passing south of Cape Kennedy, or rather the Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral, so it is very likely we will still see more rain. At the same time, Roxanne could scoot a little bit to the east. Cooler air is spilling in behind that storm system. Windy conditions through the lakes tonight and pushing to the east throughout the day tomorrow. Look west for sunshine, a lot of it. Cool weather until you get well south and west. Great Lakes region all the way to James Bay, rain and snow mix north and west. Up into Canada, western provinces, more rain than anything there, and kind of cool. Look south and central into the United States, into Mexico, 80s and 90s, nice weather. East coast, still kind of cool into the evening time. The front sweeping farther offshore as you travel through the New England states and farther south, but still down into Florida. It will be making rain. Clearing skies, cooling air through most of the Gulf Coast region. Again, still in the Great Lakes region, we have the rain-snow mix all the way up through Quebec and back into Ontario. Well west, more rain is likely going to be falling.
It was a busy week for the scientists who run the Hubble Space Telescope. They released a series of interesting images, including this shot of an unusually bright, apparently fragmented comet. It's the comet Hale-Bopp, discovered this past July by a pair of amateur astronomers of the same names. The Hubble image shows a blob of free-flying debris near the comet. Hale-Bopp is still about 600 million miles from Earth, outside the orbit of Jupiter. Meanwhile, at the solar system's largest planet, the Hubble captured this family portrait of Jupiter's 4 largest moons. Scientists say these are the best pictures of Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, and Io taken since Voyager was in the Jovian neighborhood in the early 80s. Of particular interest, a 200-mile diameter yellowish-white spot near the center of this image of Io. Astronomers believe it is evidence of new lava flows on the heavily volcanic moon. And before we leave outer space, check out this computer animation of an asteroid called Toutatis. Astronomers are marveling at the way it tumbles. Most asteroids spin in a spiral, like a well-thrown football. But the gods must have fumbled Toutatis because it is one wobbly asteroid. Toutatis will pass close to Earth, a mere 1,000,000 miles away, on September 29th, 2004. So mark your calendar.
Columbia is scheduled to lift off Sunday morning from Cape Canaveral in Florida, but there's only a 20% chance of good weather. NASA has already pushed back the liftoff time in hopes the weather will improve later in the day. The delays have been caused by equipment failure and a hurricane.
The U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia is ready for launch. The countdown has just been resumed, but chances for liftoff are as dismal as the weather. 7 astronauts are aboard the fueled spacecraft. Liftoff is planned for about half an hour from now. But NASA says low clouds and rain could delay the launch of Columbia's 16-day scientific mission for a 6th time. Weather and mechanical problems have grounded the shuttle 5 times before. Columbia is on the launch pad, ready, willing, and waiting for liftoff. But thick clouds and rain stand in the way. For more information on the scheduled launch, we turn to CNN's John Zarella, who joins us live from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. John, will there be a liftoff?
I guess your guess is as good as mine or NASA's. Right now, everyone is just waiting to see whether the weather cooperates. Earlier today, it was rainy, thick black clouds hung over the Space Center, but a frontal boundary is moving through now and still low gray clouds here. But NASA says that there is clearing weather behind all this, and that it should start to clear here sometime in the next half hour or so. They have until 1:15 p.m. Eastern Time in order to launch. Right now, the astronauts, the 7 astronauts, have been on board Columbia since 9 a.m. Eastern Time, so more than 3 hours waiting to get the launch off the ground and get up on this 16-day mission. They originally were supposed to go at 10:47 a.m. this morning. That, of course, has come and gone, and we are at the T-minus 9-minute mark and holding, and have been since then. And NASA intends to continue waiting until they get an opportunity in this weather. Again, they have until about 1:15 Eastern Time. The astronauts, once they do get in orbit, will begin a 16-day science mission. It's a microgravity mission. They will be working inside a space laboratory, and while one NASA official said this mission would be like watching grass grow, there are many practical applications to what they will be doing in space, things that will benefit humans on Earth. Some of it could result in better drugs, better semiconductors, better computer chips, even some fire safety improvements, they say, from some of the experiments they will be doing in space. So lots of things that can be garnered from this mission if and when they get it off the ground. The problem they face is that if they can't go today, they'll probably have to stand down till next Thursday or Friday. And if that doesn't come about, then they might just opt to wait until after the Atlantis mission, which is supposed to be the last mission of the year, scheduled in early November. That mission is a rendezvous with the Russian space station Mir, a very high priority mission. So lots of question marks still await NASA, and some of them will be answered in about the next hour. Relitza?
Thank you, John. I've been speaking to CNN's John Zarella, who joined us from the Kennedy Space Center. Another no-go for the launch of the U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia. The forces of nature may have the final say. Gusty winds are keeping the U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia on the ground. A planned launch from Cape Canaveral was halted 9 minutes before the scheduled blast-off on Sunday due to bad weather. NASA is giving the spacecraft another chance within the hour, though, if the clouds clear long enough. 7 astronauts are waiting aboard. It's the 5th takeover delay for this mission. If Columbia starts on the ground on Sunday, it will be a record for launch delays. The launch of the U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia has been delayed yet again. About half an hour ago, a planned takeoff from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida was halted due to bad weather, minutes before the scheduled launch. Earlier on Sunday, the original launch time was moved forward for the same reason. 7 astronauts waited aboard for hours, hoping that the clouds would clear before the launch window had passed.
Die neue Mannschaft der amerikanischen Raumfähre Columbia auf ihren Start. 6-mal ist der Countdown schon abgebrochen worden. Mehrfach hatte es technische Probleme gegeben. Heute spielte das Wetter nicht mit. Die Raumfahrtbehörde NASA kommt nun in Zeitnot, denn am 1. November soll die Raumfähre Atlantis zur russischen Weltraumstation Mir starten.
No-go for the launch of the U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia. This time, the forces of nature ruled. As the Space Shuttle Columbia runs into new problems of a natural kind. And gusty winds have kept the U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia on the ground again. A planned launch from Cape Canaveral was halted again on Sunday, just minutes before the scheduled blast-off. The 7 astronauts walked off the shuttle after spending hours lying on their backs and strapped in seats waiting for takeoff. This is the 6th time the scientific shuttle mission has been delayed.
On Roxanne's return as the world today continues.
With the help of Roxanne, the shuttle Columbia makes space history without even leaving the ground.
For NASA, as the launch of the Shuttle Columbia was postponed for a record-tying 6th time. Thick, low clouds around the Florida launch site caused the delay. Columbia's 16-day laboratory research mission has been plagued by repeated weather and mechanical problems. Shuttle managers say they may try the launch again on Thursday at the earliest. Hurricane Roxanne may be paying a return visit to Mexico's southern Gulf Coast. And Ted Texter joins us now for the latest.
The latest is, Jill, the storm is up to 85 miles per hour in intensity, maximum sustained winds, drifting somewhat to the south and to the east. You can see not much movement in the past 12 hours or so. The Yucatan Peninsula, of course, has already been strafed by the storm. It could head back that way, a little bit more to the south and to the east, could head more southerly. It's just a big spinning top out there right now, so its direction is somewhat undetermined. It doesn't look like it's going to move a lot anytime real soon. Might intensify a little bit more, probably not a lot. We'll watch it carefully. We'll keep you posted. We'll let you have the coordinates on the storm system now. Still, it is well out in open water, so some intensification is a possibility. Let me take it a little bit farther north now, into Florida. We have more rain there. Of course, the shuttle was scrubbed this morning because of the weather. More bad weather is expected in Florida, central to southern sections for the next couple of days. Front that's pushed offshore on the east coast is still hanging around. It will for a while across South Florida, so more rain is in your forecast.
Forecast weather map indicates a cold front and a storm system moving through the upper Midwest, but not a lot of bad weather associated with it. However, things could be chilly enough that at least overnight we could see a little bit of snowfall, even at lower elevations. It is still raining in Florida. South Florida has been plagued with heavy rainfall over the last several days. Flooding has been a problem. You can see the frontal boundary still in the vicinity, and more rain is on tap for South Florida. By the way, the low pressure center that you see at the very bottom of your screen, the remnants of what was once a hurricane called Roxanne, should be nothing more than a tropical depression by Thursday morning.
30 mitteleuropäischer Zeit brach es an, das neue Fernsehzeitalter für Europa. Mit dem Astra 1E wurde der erste digitale Satellit ins All geschossen, der in der Lage ist, europaweit bis zu 108 TV-Programme gleichzeitig auszustrahlen. Über ihn können auch digitale Rundfunkprogramme in CD-Qualität und Datendienste übermittelt werden. Der Satellit wird eine Lebensdauer von ca. 14 Jahren haben. Astra 1E wurde mit der europäischen Trägerrakete Ariane von Kourou in Französisch-Guyana aus erfolgreich ins All gebracht.
Die Rakete startete vergangene Nacht vom Raumfahrtzentrum in Kourou. Nach 20 Minuten erreichte sie die Umlaufbahn und koppelte den Astra 1E ab. Der Satellit kann zur gleichen Zeit bis zu 108 Fernsehprogramme ausstrahlen. Auch Radioprogramme in CD-Qualität werden damit transportierbar. Ende des Jahres soll der Trabant den regulären Sendebetrieb aufnehmen.
Ab dem Jahr 2003 soll die Raumstation Alpha um die Erde kreisen. Die USA, Russland, Japan und Kanada arbeiten bereits daran. Jetzt werden auch die Europäer dabei sein. Die Finanzierung des Projekts ist gesichert. 1,2 Milliarden Mark muss Deutschland als einer der Hauptgeldgeber für die beiden europäischen Komponenten aufbringen. Dazu gehört das Raumlabor Columbus, das unter der Federführung der DASA entstehen wird. Das 7 Meter lange Mehrzwecklabor wird fest an der Raumstation angekoppelt. Ein unbemannter Raumtransporter zur Versorgung der Orbitalstation soll unter französischer Regie entstehen. Er wird mit Hilfe der neuen Ariane 5 Trägerrakete ins All gebracht, die nächstes Jahr erstmals starten soll.
Im Dunkel des Weltalls hat heute Nacht eine technische Revolution begonnen. Eine Ariane-Rakete hat den ersten digitalen Fernsehsatelliten Astra 1E ausgesetzt. Er kann 108 Programme in Superqualität gleichzeitig ausstrahlen.
Mit der Revolution der europäischen Fernsehtechnik, dem Satelliten Astra 1E an Bord, hob die Ariane um 1:38 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit vom Raumfahrtzentrum Kourou in Französisch-Guyana ab. Rund 20 Minuten später ist der 3 Tonnen schwere künstliche Himmelskörper ausgesetzt worden. Astra 1E wird in einer stationären Umlaufbahn über Afrika positioniert und ganz Europa mit digitalen Fernseh- und Rundfunkprogrammen beliefern. In den kommenden 3 Jahren soll der neue Trabant noch 3 volldigitale Kollegen bekommen, die gemeinsam bis zu 1000 Programme abstrahlen können. Astra 1E ist ab Dezember einsatzfähig und wird 14 Jahre lang senden. Für den Empfang der digitalen Programme allerdings braucht der Zuschauer ein Zusatzgerät, das für ca. 1000 Mark im Handel zu haben sein wird.
The following is CNN's coverage of a live event.
Hello, I'm Sonia Rissler. The Space Shuttle Columbia is just seconds away from takeoff. It has been delayed 6 times, but now it looks like they're ready to go. Let's listen in to NASA.
Computers have primary control of all the vehicle's critical functions.
20.
T-minus 15 seconds. 12. 10. 9. 8. 7. We have a go for main engine start. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. And liftoff. Liftoff of the Space Shuttle Columbia, catapulting scientific knowledge through microgravity research.
We're in a roll, Houston.
Houston now controlling, Columbia underway on its 18th trip to space, rolling on course for a 172-mile-high, 39-degree inclination orbit.
And roll program, Houston.
Columbia's altitude 15,000 feet. 3 engines on board Columbia are now throttling back to 2/3 throttle to prepare the spacecraft to pass through the area of maximum air pressure and go supersonic. Columbia's speed now 800 miles per hour, altitude 34,000 feet, 3 nautical miles downrange from the launch pad.
Columbia, go ahead, throttle up. Oh, we heard you that time, Blaine. Go ahead, throttle up.
3 main engines on Columbia now back at full throttle. Columbia is now airborne for 1.5 minutes. It's burned almost 2.25 million pounds of propellant already, weighing less than half of what it did at launch. 3 main engines on Columbia working well at full throttle. Good hydraulic systems, good electrical systems. Altitude now 100,000 feet. 14 miles downrange from the launch pad. Columbia traveling 2,800 miles per hour. Flight controllers are standing by for burnout and separation of the twin solid rocket first stage, upcoming in just about 8 seconds. Good solid rocket booster separation is confirmed. Columbia now on its 3 main engines, second stage. Altitude 185,000
There
feet.
she goes, the U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia in space, heading for a 16-day mission, one of NASA's longest. On board, 7 astronauts, 5 of them are rookies. They've never been in space before. The commanders have. They're also carrying $101 million worth of scientific experiments, including experiments into microgravity. This was a mission. This was the 7th attempt. 6 times they had to cancel, twice for bad weather, 4 times for technical problems. It tied a record, Columbia's own record of cancellations. Had they cancelled this one, because at the time the weather was looking not so good over Florida, it would have been an all-time record for NASA. But there she is, the Space Shuttle Columbia in space, heading for a 16-day mission. World News is next in just a few minutes, but we leave you now with another look at the successful launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia.
12. 10. 9. 8. 7. We have a go for main engine start. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. And liftoff. Liftoff of the Space Shuttle Columbia, catapulting scientific knowledge through microgravity research.
We're in a roll, Houston.
Houston now controlling, Columbia underway on its 18th trip to space, rolling on course for a 172-mile-high, 39-degree inclination orbit.
And roll program, Houston.
This has been a CNN Live event.
Clouds, thick and low, hung over the Kennedy Space Center. For a while, it appeared as if the 7th attempt to launch the Shuttle Columbia would end as the others had.
in a scrub. But the crew had other ideas. They wore baseball caps backwards, as ball players do when their team needs a little luck. The fashion statement may become tradition. The clouds broke up and a computer relay failure was quickly fixed.
This test team has worked really hard to get you to this point. It's your turn for a great 16-day mission.
We're closing our visors, and we can't wait to get to work.
Had this attempt been scrubbed, Columbia would have broken its own record for most delays. Liftoff came just a few minutes behind schedule.
And liftoff of the Space Shuttle Columbia, catapulting scientific knowledge through microgravity research.
For the launch team, finally getting the vehicle off the ground was a great relief.
Patience and perseverance are a couple of real good virtues to have in this business, along with a couple of real crack weathermen and a superhuman launch team. And when you put all those together, I think it eventually spells success like we had this morning.
Columbia, the oldest vehicle in the shuttle fleet, is now in orbit. During the mission, the astronauts will work in a 23-foot-long Space Lab module conducting microgravity experiments. One NASA manager described the mission as watching grass grow. But the work has practical applications, from the production of better drugs and crops to superior computer chips and semiconductors. With Columbia at long last in orbit, NASA can turn its attention to Atlantis. The last flight of the year, it's scheduled to depart November 11th for a rendezvous with the Russian space station. John Zarella, CNN at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
Here we are on the launch pad, the final few seconds, and feeling like we're finally going to go. We heard the main engine start at about 6 seconds prior to the launch. We could feel the twang, as they call it, and then at booster ignition, off we went. And I'll tell you, it was quite a ride. I guess from the ground it looked pretty spectacular because the shuttle was hidden by the smoke and vapor right after liftoff. As I mentioned before, we were all pretty happy on SN, having an opportunity to look out the window, feeling comfortable. And one name I didn't mention that I really ought to is Joy Barcolt. She was the team lead of all the trainers, and she really pulled us and them together, I think. We were going uphill pretty quickly. At this point, you'll start to see some vapors as the shock waves build up on the nose of the orbiter and external tank as we pass through the region of maximum dynamic pressure here. The shuttle really vibrates a lot. It's, you know, it's the ride of your life. It's about all I can say. This is a nice view of us as we punch through a cloud deck there, and the shadow gets cast on the top of the clouds. SRB separation was just like it is in the simulator, I thought. A bright flash, a little pop, and all of a sudden the ride changes from being really abrupt to and vibration to very smooth.
First thing we do on orbit is open the doors and deploy the KU band. That was my job and Mike's job. And that, of course, is the source of all the TV. And on this particular mission, we had digital data, 6 channels of digital TV down for the experiments, which was really just great in terms of data management and resource management for us on board and the folks on the ground. But the first job that, right after opening the doors, what Mike and Fred and I had to do as the blue shift or the night shift was go to bed. This is probably the hardest thing that we had to do the whole mission, because it was just, I just can't tell you how exciting Ascent was. As Mike said, it's the ride of your life, and it's something I just still look back on and just grin. And going to bed, well, I'll just say, at least we shut the doors.
In addition to wearing our caps backward, I wore my lucky socks on the day that we finally got launched. That was the key to it. 2 St. Christopher medals didn't get us off on the second attempt, but the socks did it. After 30 days of quarantine, I knew I was ready to launch, but I wasn't sure I could remember what the mission was. But when it came time to do Space Lab activation, it was just like in the simulator, only nothing broke, and everything powered up just like it was supposed to. We didn't power off the lab, and we didn't do any hot coupler swaps, so we stayed in good graces there. Everything came up just like it was supposed to. We were amazed and delighted. We had a fairly light day scheduled on the first day to accommodate anybody who might not feel well, or Space Lab systems that might not feel well. And we didn't have any of those problems. So what we ended up doing on our first day is really set the laboratory up well for a 2-week space station. Make it useful to do all the experiments we needed to do over that time.
While Kathy and I were setting up the lab, Kent and I were doing a trim burn to get us just in the right orbit. We rolled the payload bay door partially in on the port side.
and went into the gravity gradient attitude. Then the next 15 days were pretty much the same, and they usually started like this.
Much like here on Earth, you brush your teeth. What I wasn't prepared for was after I was done brushing my teeth, there's no sink up there to spit this stuff out in, and so I had to have an alternate plan. And mine was to kind of swallow it, and it didn't work out that well. You saw Al shaving, which is very much like here on Earth, and Mike now is riding the ergometer, and that was our main means of exercise, and we exercised every day on orbit. Along with exercise, though, comes the overhead of cleaning up, and without a shower, the sponge baths take a while, and then also wash on our hair. We had a rinseless shampoo that worked really well, and Katie's demonstrating it for us here, and you'll see in a minute she managed to get her hair dry.
I figure if I keep my hair clean, everybody can. It worked out just great, actually. I was a little worried about it before flight, but keeping clean up there was no problem. Now this is, I'm at the glove box doing that protein crystal growth there, and I'm actually using a restraint system developed here at JSC called Albert. We refer to this as Albert the Thing, as opposed to Albert the payload specialist. And I'm working on protein crystal growth, and as you know, these crystals are used to help design drugs for diseases. And it's kind of a lock and key sort of effect where if we can grow more perfect crystals, we know what the lock looks like, and the drug is then the key.
Here I am at the glove box again on Albert, so to speak, or Al squared. And we're working in the glove box, and I'm really looking at mixing profiles. It's very important in the zeolite community. Some of the zeolite community don't recognize that, but it is when you bring two reacting liquids together. And on orbit, we have some special problems. This is the bubble generation here. We talk about bubbles, so sometimes we don't want those bubbles. And so now that we have them, what do we do? And what we do with them, and this is the main experiment that I use that information to power up and to generate, is you'll see me rotate this cylinder, which has the solutions in them after we mix them. And we rotate it in order to take advantage of centrifugal force and throw the heavier fluids to the outside, the bubbles to the inside, so they make one big bubble, which doesn't have what we call a lot of nucleation sites, and allow us to grow fewer but larger crystals with fewer defects. So that's one of the things that we had learned on USML-1 and confirmed again on SpaceHab. This is called CGF. We're doing electronic crystal growth here, and Kathy's in the glove box, a closed area. Very difficult task to take in and out what we call SACAs, and I help her a little bit once in a while, and the commander's documenting it, so if we make a mistake, everybody knows we made a mistake. But we didn't make any mistakes that we'll admit to. And here I am taking the SACA very carefully down to stow, because as all PIs, including myself, they're a little bit paranoid about shaking and vibrating, so it'd be a terrible thing for one of the PIs to ruin a crystal, so I made sure we didn't do that.
In this shot, I'm interacting with the geophysical fluid flow cell experiment. This experiment, again, simulates convection in planetary atmospheres. In this view, you can think of it as a weather satellite, basically looking at the southern hemisphere of the planet. The pole is at the bottom of the screen, and the equator is at the top, and you can see waves propagating around the equator, and somewhat reminiscent of cold fronts propagating down from the pole. Another fluid experiment was the surface tension-driven convection experiment. We all spent a lot of time on that one as well. Basically, in that experiment, you can heat the top surface of the liquid, and because there's a variation in surface tension with temperature, a fluid flow occurs at the surface and also drags around the interior of the fluid. And this experiment has a lot of importance not only to the film coating industry, but also has impact on crystal growth. In this fluid experiment, we were looking at manipulating a drop using acoustic fields. This experiment also had applications to drug delivery systems, and there's a lot of interest in surfactants. In this particular case, we're rotating a drop until it fissions.
This was one of the experiments that we all fought to do. Get up in the morning, you were always tempted to actually change the payload activity plan so that you'd be the one doing drop physics. Because as you can see, each input that you make to this acoustic chamber actually changes very dramatically what the drop does. And so we have a chamber with speakers on all sides, and we're changing literally the speaker pressure to distort the drop and also to do to maybe spin it around like this. What you're going to see coming up is in just a minute, is one particularly interesting experiment that we did where we actually brought two fluids together. This isn't quite it yet, but we used this experiment to learn what happens when we do have two fluids, what happens when we have a bubble inside a bubble. But when we brought these two fluids together, they actually had an interface in between them, which we refer to as the beach ball. And what this is going to be used for, it was a development model for actually forming vesicles for drug delivery systems. Now, we didn't really develop a drug delivery system, but we did look at the way two fluids would interact in a single chamber. You can see that's what happens when you do the wrong thing with the knob.
We had, as Katie said, 6 channels of video down, and this may be the first space flight or space lab flight ever where video downlink was not the limiting resource in planning. And also, most of the PIs left Marshall at the end of the mission with all of their data, whereas on USML-1 it took 7.5 months to get all their data out to them. So this was the first demonstration of that. It's something that we'll certainly need for space station. And that and the data uplink and downlink we had were kind of the first demonstrations of telescience that I think we've ever done. Another fluids experiment we had on board, which was an awful lot of fun, was the fiber-supported droplet combustion experiment. We put a small drop of fuel on a fiber, and the only purpose of the fiber was to keep the drop where we wanted it to be, and ignite it. In one camera view, this one, you could just see the drop shrinking as it's being consumed. In another camera view, you can't see much of the color of the flame front, but you can see that the fiber on either side of the drop is being heated, and that's where the flame front is propagating. We learned a lot from doing a drop physics module on how to deploy these drops and get these guys burning. There was a little bit of trouble with this experiment, as anybody who worked the flight here knows. Mike was our IFM person on this and got it working.
We also had another series of theoretical, I'd call them, experiments on crystal growth, and what we were looking at is hard sphere models and how they would represent the formation of a crystal structure and the interface between that crystal structure and the fluid from which it formed. And we also use lasers to look at diffraction patterns to find out exactly where that interface was and what kind of crystal formed. And the crystal structures that were formed were not those that were predicted. They're still analyzing why that is. So that was kind of a surprise.
While the payload crew, the 4 of them were in the lab, the orbiter crew, we had some experiments up in the middeck too that we were working on. We activated and deactivated some protein crystal growth experiments. We also, and I'm from potato country in Colorado, was pretty proud of the fact we managed to grow 5 potatoes in space. And I'll let Mike talk about that.
This is just an example of me giving some CO2 to the plants inside, and the real goal behind the experiment was to determine how to make a nutrient delivery system, both water and other nutrients, to the plants in case we, for long duration missions, we need to know how to grow those foods so that we don't have to take them with us.
We also did our part for medical science, and here I'm doing a neurovestibular DSO, and it has to do with the rate your eyeball contract.
Well, this is how we got all those Earth obs pictures you saw at the beginning of the presentation. Take one of those big Hasselblad cameras, point it out the window, and this is the scene that the operator would see. Up in the top is the west coast of California, and you can see the greens of the trees and the mountains, and then the yellow stripe there in the middle is the northern San Joaquin Valley. Next green stripe is the Sierra Nevada, and then you'll see the browns of the high desert. Lake Tahoe and Pyramid Lake will just start to come into view. You can see it doesn't go by very fast. Most of you have seen this sort of view before. But you really realize you're going fast when you think of the distance involved in just this 30 or 40 second picture. First week we had really clear views of almost the whole United States. So we got to take a lot of shots of a lot of different cities, especially potato country in Colorado.
This next sequence here is over we're currently over India now, looking north, and those are the Himalayas there in the middle of the screen, with the Brahmaputra River both on the south side of the Himalayas and also on the north side of the Himalayas. And you can see the vast difference in both color, which basically is vegetation, and also elevation. This was Super Typhoon Angela, which was taken over the Philippine Sea, which hit that set of islands with winds over 200 miles an hour. And you can just make out the circular formation in the clouds, although on this particular shot you don't really get any sense of an eye in the middle of the hurricane, but it was certainly strong nonetheless. This was an attempt at a night scene. We were over sort of central United States here looking west, and with that line on the left isn't the horizon, believe it or not, it's the edge of the atmosphere, and that'll become more clear in a second. But if you watch this star up here, it'll actually go below it, and you'll see it what will look like through the Earth. So that's clearly not the edge of the Earth. So this is the thickness of the atmosphere. And these are the lights of big cities. There were Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and here comes the Big Apple. And as the sun rises, which is about to do, it washes out the camera, the sensitivity changes, and sort of made our own fade to white, I guess.
The daily maintenance was done, and filter cleaning, and being a pilot, I got to do that. And filter cleaning I enjoyed a lot more than keeping the WCS clean. But unlike here on Earth, dust, there's no floor, there's no dam, so dust accumulates in the different places in the filters because it's always floating in the air. So anywhere it's drawn, you've got to make sure you get to it. Space did lend itself to some innovative cleaning styles that were a lot more fun up there than on Earth.
We carried another computer on board to do the pilot simulation. That was a really useful piece of gear, I thought, to help me prepare for my first space shuttle landing. And this is what it looked like on the scene, just like out the window of the real orbiter.
This is the Blue Crew enjoying lunch. As you can see, I'm finishing up my lunch back there. Fred is cleaning his silverware with a handy wipe, and Katie is probably reading the news, some humorous story. But we did that. We got an hour off in the middle of our 12-hour day. And the mail we'd get up electronically on a keyboard, sort of like email.
We got our mail up on the KCA link. I'll talk about that after the World Series, maybe.
Yeah, you may have seen us. We got the chance to throw out the first pitch in Game 5 of the World Series, which was really a lot of fun. And more importantly, we got a chance to watch it. You can see us in the lower right-hand corner watching the monitor, and we're seeing the image that you see in the upper left-hand corner.
And at the end of the mission, or close to the end of the mission, we had put everything away. We were getting a little bored, so we decided that we'd do a little magic show. And I've tried for years to do that, never been able to do it. But now the trick was to get her down without doing something bad.
Sonnenfinsternis in Asien. Mit Brillen und Teleskopen bereiteten sich Menschen wie hier in der gut 1000 Jahre alten kambodschanischen Tempelstadt Angkor Wat auf ein seltenes Himmelsschauspiel vor. Dann wurde es schlagartig dunkel. Für kurze Zeit schob sich der Neumond zwischen Erde und Sonne und verdeckte in diesem Teil der Welt die Sonnenscheibe fast vollständig. Die kosmischen Schattenspiele der Sonnenfinsternis dauerten beinahe 2 Minuten lang. Vom Iran über Indien bis schließlich nach Kambodscha verdunkelte der Kernschatten des Mondes einen rund 14.000 Kilometer langen und maximal 78 Kilometer breiten Streifen auf der Erdoberfläche. Deutschland muss sich für solch ein Naturspektakel noch ein wenig gedulden. Erst am 11. August 1999 kann in Bayern eine totale Sonnenfinsternis beobachtet werden. Explosion im All. Die unbemannte Rakete Conestoga war von Wallops Island in Virginia gestartet, einer Station der US-Weltraumbehörde NASA. Doch der Flug in den Weltraum dauerte für die 100 Tonnen schwere Conestoga nur 45 Sekunden lang. Dann stürzte sie taumelnd zurück zur Erde. Mit der Explosion verpuffte auch gleichzeitig eine Investition der NASA in Höhe von 14 Millionen $. Die Rakete sollte einen Satelliten für wissenschaftliche Experimente ins All bringen. Einer der Auftraggeber für dieses Projekt der NASA war Walt Disney. Die Absturzursache ist noch nicht bekannt.
Conestoga ist 45 Sekunden nach dem Start von der NASA-Basis Wallops Island in der Luft explodiert. Die 100 Tonnen schwere und 17 Meter hohe Rakete sollte bei ihrem Jungfernflug einen wissenschaftlichen Satelliten ins All befördern. Die Rakete hob ab, obwohl die NASA den Countdown zuvor abgebrochen hatte.
Rakete ist 45 Sekunden nach dem Start auf einem NASA-Gelände an der Atlantikküste explodiert. Die 200 Tonnen schwere Rakete sollte einen Satelliten ins All bringen. Der ursprünglich für August vorgesehene Start war bereits zweimal verschoben worden. Die Ursache für die Explosion steht noch nicht fest.
By the tens of thousands, most by car, driving 6 or 7 hours to ensure a good seat for what they call the show. It is an event that occurs each year, but never in the same place. In a lifetime, you will be lucky to see it twice. It is a complete solar eclipse. In central Thailand, they came with their cameras, special dark glasses, and telescopes. Looking at the sun directly is dangerous. During an eclipse, even more so. This is Thailand's foremost astronomer. This is his third eclipse. 2 years ago, he purchased a home here after he discovered it was located in the path of the total eclipse.
Last time, when we had a total solar eclipse through Thailand, it was 40 years ago. Now, if we don't travel, we have to wait.
The first place to view this eclipse was in Iran. Then the path traced across India, Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, and Malaysia before fading into the Pacific Ocean. As the moon slowly blotted out the sun, people gathered around TV sets in the viewing area, the safest way to watch. Others peered inside a special tent where a mirror reflected the image on a white sheet. As the moment approached for what is called totality, the sky darkened, birds became confused, and the sun disappeared. Within a few seconds, the fiery glow of the sun could be seen clearly. It is a moment when the educated are mystified and the superstitious are terrified.
Some people think that the sun is a god and the moon is another god, and the eclipsing thing is some demon who try to swallow the sun.
For those lucky enough to be inside the 70-kilometer-wide path in Thailand, it was a view that will be remembered.
Once in a lifetime, we have a chance to see the sun and the moon to match together.
It's beautiful. It's the most beautiful sight I ever seen in my life.
I thought there would be, more planets, and you would see much more of a greater thing, but I think it was worth coming.
The total eclipse only lasted 1 minute and 42 seconds, the sun now peeking out from behind the moon. It is a sight people here will remember for a lifetime. They may have to. The next time this type of event will occur, 75 years from now. Tom Mintier, CNN, Korat, Thailand.
In Indien erwarteten Hunderttausende das einzigartige Naturereignis, teils mit Ehrfurcht, teils mit abergläubischer Angst. Die Sonnenfinsternis ist für die Hindus der Zorn der Götter. Ein Dämon verschleiert die Sonne. Schwangere Frauen beten, damit sie keine missgebildeten Kinder zur Welt bringen. Der maximal 80 Kilometer breite Schattenpfad wandert dann weiter nach Osten. Und bis es zur totalen Finsternis kommt, scheinen Sonne und Mond die Rollen zu tauschen. Die Sonne scheint eine Mondsichel zu sein. Mittlerweile hat die Finsternis Thailand erreicht. Hier werden Feuerwerke gezündet, um die bösen Geister zu vertreiben. Ganz anders in Kambodscha. Buddhistische Mönche und Tempeltänzerinnen freuen sich auf das Wunder am Himmel. Hier in der 1000 Jahre alten Tempelstadt Angkor war die Sonnenfinsternis vollkommen, dauerte 2 Minuten lang. Nach der Legende verschlingt der Mond die Sonne, nach und nach, bis nur noch ein gleißender Strahlenkranz von ihr bleibt. Und wenn sie wieder aus seinem Bauch herauskommt, dann ist das ein gutes Omen für die Menschen.
Wissenschaftler versetzt sie in Begeisterung, Abergläubische in Furcht und Schrecken, die totale Sonnenfinsternis. Millionen Menschen richteten in Asien den Blick zum Himmel, um zu sehen, wie der Tag zur Nacht wurde.
Am Himmel über dem Zentrum des Iran war das Phänomen zuerst sichtbar. Kurz nach ihrem Aufgang verwandelte der Mond die Sonne in eine Sichel und verschluckte langsam das Tageslicht. Die Finsternis zu ungewohnter Stunde, für viele Sternendeuter immer noch ein Vorbote des Unheils. In Indien und Thailand prophezeiten Wahrsager Erdbeben und Flutkatastrophen. Doch zunächst verhieß die Sonnenfinsternis eine Umsatzsteigerung. Schutzbrillen für den sicheren Blick nach oben waren heiß begehrt, auch die Tourismusindustrie verdiente. Wissenschaftler und Hobbyastronomen aus aller Welt waren zu Tausenden angereist. Sie wollten miterleben, wie der Mond sich vor die Sonne schob. Ein Brennpunkt für viele, die Tempelstadt Angkor in Kambodscha. Auch die jahrtausendealten Gemäuer versanken kurz in Dunkelheit. Wenige Minuten Nacht am Tag Ein Schattenspiel, das in nicht allzu ferner Zeit auch in Süddeutschland erwartet wird, im August 99.
Tagen beschäftigten sich Zeitungen und Ausstellungen mit dem Phänomen und versuchten, die Menschen darauf vorzubereiten. Riesige Plakate forderten sie auf, die Augen zu schützen. Und das funktionierte auch. Heute Morgen wurden schon lange vor dem Ereignis die ersten Ausblicke geprobt. Eine eigene Pappbrillenmode war rechtzeitig kreiert worden. Und auch das T-Shirt zur Sonnenfinsternis war natürlich pünktlich auf dem Markt. Jahrmarkt und auch Partystimmung auf Straßen und Plätzen. Bis auf die Angst. Eigentlich glaube ich nicht, dass uns die Sonnenfinsternis schaden kann, sagt er. Aber zur Sicherheit habe ich heute Morgen doch zu Rahu gebetet, dem Gott des Bösen. Falls jetzt etwas Schreckliches passiert, soll er mich dabei verschonen. Dass das eigene Schicksal von diesem Ereignis Schaden nehmen könne, davon sind fast alle überzeugt. Rund 50.000 Thailänder waren hierher an die Grenze zu Kambodscha gereist, wo man die Sonnenfinsternis am besten beobachten konnte. Und dann war es endlich soweit. Der böse Gott Rahu fraß die Sonne, ganz langsam. Die Zuschauer wurden stiller. Und dann war es plötzlich dunkel, kalt und leise. Für etwas über eine Minute war die Sonne hinter dem Mond verschwunden. Das vorher von Krankenschwestern ausgeteilte Riechsalz war unnötig. Die Thailänder ertrugen es mit Fassung. Aber so ganz sicher war man sich nicht, dass Rahu die Sonne wieder hergeben würde. Jubel, als sie wiederkehrte. Jetzt überlegen hier die gläubigen Pessimisten, welche Naturkatastrophe dieses Himmelsereignis wohl auslösen wird.
Sonnenfinsternis über Asien. Von Iran über Indien bis nach Kambodscha verdunkelte heute die Scheibe des Neumondes für maximal 2 Minuten und 14 Sekunden die Sonne. Die Tempelstadt Angkor in Kambodscha lag fast 2 Minuten im Dunkeln. Soldaten sicherten hier die Schaulustigen gegen mögliche Angriffe der Roten Khmer. In den Tempeln schlugen buddhistische Mönche die Trommeln, um böse Geister zu vertreiben. Zu dem Naturschauspiel waren Tausende in die Tempelstadt gekommen, darunter auch Astronomen aus aller Welt.
Die Karibik, aber hier sehen Sie, ist das Wetter jetzt wieder zur Normalität zurückgekehrt. Sonne und ganz, ganz wenig Wolken am Himmel und eine Temperatur zwischen 25 und 28 Grad. So viel vom Wetter.
Hello and welcome. I'm Miles O'Brien. It's an event that's completely predictable, and yet it never ceases to amaze. A total eclipse of the sun, like the one that occurred on Monday. For viewers in a narrow strip across India, Thailand, and the Philippines, the sun was completely blocked by the moon's shadow for about 2 minutes. In a much larger area of Asia and northern Australia, people saw a partial eclipse. The next total solar eclipse will be in March of 1997, and once again, it will be visible only in parts of Asia. NASA suffered a rocket-related disappointment on Monday when an unmanned Conestoga rocket veered off course 46 seconds after liftoff.
We have vehicle failure. We do have vehicle failure at this time.
As intended by its manufacturer, the system blew up the missile when it went off course. Debris showered into the Atlantic off Virginia's eastern shore. Launched from NASA's Wallops Island Flight Facility, the $20 million rocket was attempting to put a NASA satellite loaded with scientific experiments into orbit. The rocket's designers say it may be weeks before they figure out what went wrong. The recent heavy flooding in South Florida has some residents worried about unwelcome visitors. High water in the Everglades has forced some threatening animals like snakes and gators out of the swamps and into backyards. CNN's John Zarella has the story.
In recent months, nature has been doing its darndest to return Florida to the swamp it was before humans started taking over. Months of steady rains have left communities underwater, lakes and canals overflowing their banks. And where there is high water in Florida, you find all kinds of critters.
My dogs don't even know what it is like to be out there because I'm so scared.
Scared because the high water has alligators out looking for higher ground, many times in somebody's backyard.
He's going to be real leery of where he comes up at right now.
This is where trapper Lee Kramer comes in, contracted by the Florida Game and Freshwater Fish Commission to catch the unwelcome guests. During the past week, dozens of gators have been spotted lurking on the banks in neighborhood lakes. Kramer and Wildlife Officer John Farrell sometimes spend hours watching and waiting before they finally get their gator by the tail.
You got to hold him. I got him.
This one is a 7-footer. Classified as a nuisance gator, his days are numbered. A tough fate for creatures who were here first, but relief to area residents.
It's too much. He's too big. He's too aggressive. In fact, he stayed there when I approached him to get him back into the water. He just hung out.
Of course, man doesn't always win out over beast. Sometimes the big one gets away.
You sure ain't coming? Wind fast.
Oh, foo. Lost him.
Just because you're lucky enough to see the gator, and then you're lucky enough to get the hook in the gator, doesn't necessarily mean that the gator's going to ride home with you.
But for Kramer and Florida wildlife officers, there will always be tomorrow, particularly if it keeps raining.
You know how to stay alive, that's for sure.
John Zarella, CNN, Miami.
Dann war es meine Aufgabe zu sehen, dass die Kapsel, wo die Astronauten drin waren, startbereit war. Nachdem alles überprüft war, dann haben wir die Flugkabine zugemacht. Dann wurde die Kabine auf Luftdruck geprüft. Und dann ungefähr 55 Minuten vorm Abflug haben wir die Gegend verlassen. Ich habe alle Mondflüge gemacht, also, und auch nachher noch die Flüge für den Skylab und dann auch der letzte Apollo-Flug, der sich mit der russischen Kapsel getroffen hat. Den haben wir auch noch gemacht, ja.
Günther Wendt ist nicht der einzige Deutsche, der im amerikanischen Weltraumprogramm gearbeitet hat. Vor ihm hatten Wernher von Braun und seine Wissenschaftler die Raketen, die den ersten Menschen auf den Mond transportierten, entwickelt und gebaut. Und wie die meisten der deutschen Raketenmänner ist auch Günther Wendt nach seiner Pensionierung in der neuen Heimat USA geblieben.
Hier im Kennedy Space Center, wo die bislang größte Reise der Menschheit begann, endet Teil 5 unserer Fahrt auf der US-1. Im nächsten Teil fahren wir durch Florida, nach Miami und auf dem Overseas Highway bis nach Key West.
The Hubble telescope's orbiting Earth at this moment, capable of seeing things man has never really seen before. CNN's John Holloman looks at what Hubble has been watching.
NASA officials say this is the most dramatic picture ever taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. It's the birthplace of a group of stars from the Eagle Nebula, which is 7,000 light years away, in the constellation Serpens.
Not only are we studying star formation in our own galaxy, but really what we're studying is what must have happened in our own neighborhood 4.6 billion years ago.
These pictures may answer questions asked for hundreds of years. How stars are formed and why some are larger than others.
These stars are starting to contract, but they're doing so while being blasted by the powerful radiation field, the powerful light of other stars that is shaping them.
To show you how big the solar birthplace is, Earth and its solar system would fit on the end of one of the tiny fingertips in the Hubble pictures. The columns of cold hydrogen gas and dust are extremely dense. They're beginning to evaporate under the intense heat from nearby stars.
This process of evaporating the cloud is actually limiting the masses of the stars.
Astronomers say they can see evaporating gaseous globules, EGGs, or eggs, inside the pillars. It's a convenient name since the new stars emerge from the eggs. The light which allowed the Hubble Space Telescope to take these pictures came from a series of stars which had to be screened out in order for the telescope to see the pictures as clear as they are. John Holloman, CNN, Washington.
And this is John Hester, whom you just saw in the Holloman Report. He's been with the Hubble Project for 10 years, is an astronomer in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at Arizona State University. Dr. Hester, in these photos from Hubble, what was the most amazing thing you see, or the most surprising?
The most surprising thing that we saw was when we realized that we were actually seeing newly forming stars and the material that they were forming from being uncovered. We took the images to study the process of evaporation. There are these nearby very hot stars that are boiling away the surface of this dense interstellar cloud, and we were interested in studying that process. And when we actually got the pictures back, we looked at it and realized that, hey, that's going to let us do everything that we wanted to. And then we realized that there was something more in there, that we were actually seeing these globules of gas being dug up as the cloud around them was dispersed.
All right, so it blows away the lighter material, and what remains becomes eventually a star, but it doesn't look very hot like people think of a star, is it?
Well, temperature is kind of a funny concept, in fact. The gas that you're seeing in these pictures, the glowing stuff, is actually about twice as hot as our own star is. It's about 10,000 degrees, but it's so diffuse, and so it's not all that bright. The stars in this picture you actually don't get to see in these images, because the stars themselves are buried down inside these globules of gas. The way a star forms is that you get enough gas together that gravity can cause it to collapse and become a star, and then you don't get to see that process because it's hidden inside of all that gas and dust.
All right, Doctor, where in what we're seeing now is the star formation?
Okay, what we're seeing here is a blow-up of the surface of this cloud. And you see on there that there are many little globules, little fingers poking out of that surface. And those are the things that we're calling eggs, evaporating gaseous globules. We know from infrared pictures that buried down inside of a lot of those, at least, are new formed stars, stars in the process of forming.
And these?
This is stepping back a little bit. These are showing these three huge columns. The column on the left there is about a light year long, to give you a sense of perspective. These are the columns of gas that are being boiled away by the intense light from some nearby stars. You can, if you look at that and use your imagination, you can almost see the gas streaming off the surface of those. And it's as that gas streams away that it uncovers the forming stars. It's a little bit like a windstorm in the desert that blows the light sand away and then leaves the dense stars.
And that one on the left, you say, is the width that it would take light 1 year in which to travel, right?
Yeah, from top to bottom of the long column we saw a minute ago, that was about the length that light would travel in 1 year. What we see here, if we could go back to the blow-up that we had just a second ago, I can show you the end of that process. You saw a tiny little stalk there, sort of to the middle and a little bit to the right, a tiny little stalk, a dark finger poking out, that's got a star right on the very tip of it. That's this process going to completion. That star formed inside the molecular cloud. It was uncovered as the stuff around it was boiled away. And now here we see the star itself actually being uncovered, appearing at the tip of that feature.
Is this is 7,000 light years away. What we're seeing now has happened that long ago.
That's right.
What's going on out there now?
Well, if you could go back and take a look at that today, what you would see would look a lot like what you see today, except it'd be different. The things that we now see as eggs would probably be gone because they would have been totally boiled off. The stars inside of them would be stars that you could see now. But there might be a whole new generation of eggs that have been uncovered that are presently still buried down inside that cloud.
You getting any closer to the singularity, the thing that started all of this?
Boy, that's a big question.
Do it in a minute.
Do it in a minute. Okay. Let me answer the question this way. What we're looking at today is one small piece of a much larger puzzle. And the larger puzzle is the story of how it is that the universe began as a big bang, galaxies formed, they got their act together enough to form stars. Those stars produced heavier elements, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, the things that you and I are made out of, blasted them into space. Those got incorporated into new stars, Earth's formed, and here we sit. And so what we're looking at today is one very photogenic piece of a fascinating puzzle that astronomers are putting together these days.
All right. Having looked at a fascinating piece of a whole lot of stuff, we're going to thank Dr. Jeff Hester. He's the astronomer in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at Arizona State University at Tempe. He's been a decade working on the Hubble project, and it looks like he could spend several more lifetimes at it. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
Das Weltraumteleskop Hubble hat Aufnahmen von neu entstehenden Sternen geliefert. Sie steigen aus Verdichtungen von interstellarem Gas auf. Im rund 7000 Lichtjahre entfernten Adlernebel erheben sich riesige Säulen kalten Gases aus gewaltigen Wasserstoffwolken. In den Säulen ist das Gas so dicht, dass es unter seinem eigenen Gewicht zusammenbricht. Dabei werden junge Sterne gebildet, die dann durch die Anlagerung von Masse aus der Umgebung größer werden. Die Wissenschaftler sind begeistert. Die Aufnahmen werden Aufschlüsse über den bisher rätselhaften Vorgang geben, der die Größe von Sternen kontrolliert und warum Sterne eine bestimmte Masse besitzen.
Das Weltraumteleskop Hubble lieferte zum ersten Mal Bilder, die die Geburt von Sternen zeigen. Die sensationellen Fotos schoss Hubble im sogenannten Adlernebel, einer Region, die 7000 Lichtjahre von der Erde entfernt ist. Die Wissenschaftler der Weltraumbehörde NASA sprechen von der vielleicht größten Entdeckung der Astronomie.
A Star is Born. In diesen gigantischen fingerähnlichen Gebilden werden die neuen Sterne ausgebrütet. Wasserstoffgas verdichtet sich dort so sehr, dass es unter dem eigenen Gewicht zu fester Materie wird. So entstehen neue Sterne. Ihre Größe hängt davon ab, wie viel Gas sie ansammeln können. Ähnlich einem Schneeball, der beim Herunterrollen eines Berges immer größer wird. Seit langem spekulieren Astronomen darüber, wie Sterne eine bestimmte Größe erreichen, sagt Wissenschaftler Jeff Hester. Jetzt sehen wir vor unseren Augen, wie zumindest einer dieser Prozesse funktioniert. Dies ist die 5. spektakuläre Entdeckung des Weltraumteleskops Hubble. Das kanonenrohrartige Gerät war 1990 im All ausgesetzt worden. Die ersten 3 Jahre lieferte es wegen eines Fehlers nur unscharfe Bilder. Erst nach einer Reparatur durch amerikanische Astronauten, 600 Kilometer über der Erde, schoss Hubble die Bilder, die die Herzen der Wissenschaftler höher schlagen lassen.
Einzigartiger Einblick in die Kinderstube des Universums. Sensationelle Aufnahmen schickte das Weltraumteleskop Hubble zur Erde. Sie zeigen erstmals die Entstehung von Sternen.
In einer gigantischen fingerähnlichen Wolke aus Gas und Staub werden die Sternenembryos ausgebrütet. In den einzelnen Säulen ist das interstellare Gas so schwer, dass es zusammengedrängt wird und sich verdichtet. Ein neuer Stern ist entstanden. Am Ende steigen die neugeborenen Eggs, übersetzt Gase, aus der Wolke auf. Das Weltraumteleskop Hubble entdeckte die etwa 50 Jungsterne im Adlernebel, einer Region rund 7000 Lichtjahre von der Erde entfernt. Für die Wissenschaftler eine Sensation. Zum ersten Mal waren sie bei einer Sternengeburt live dabei.
Ist nicht der Schutzumschlag eines Science-Fiction-Romanes. Auf diesem Foto sieht man mehrere Lichtjahre hohe stalagmitenähnliche Säulen aus Gas. Aus ihren Ausläufern, den sogenannten EGGs, wurden die Sterne geboren. Das Gas war so stark verdichtet, dass es unter seinem eigenen Gewicht zusammengebrochen ist und dabei entstanden die jungen Sterne. Niemand wusste, wie es kommt, dass Sterne eine bestimmte Größe annehmen. Bis jetzt. Die Forscher erkannten, dass Sterne durch Akkumulation, das bedeutet Ansammeln der sie umgebenden Masse, wachsen. Ganz extrem vereinfacht ist das nichts anderes, als wenn es von allen Seiten auf einen Schneeball schneit, der dann ja auch größer wird.
And with a whoosh, one of the world's first launching pads also became one of its newest this week. The US Space Agency, NASA, fired off the first of a series of 6 planned scientific space probes from the Woomera rocket range. But for the remote base in southern Australia, it was not the first brush with the final frontier. Woomera was one of the first stops on the road to space. The British were the first to recognize its suitability as a spaceport, testing rockets there after World War II. Woomera was also the site of a series of controversial nuclear weapons tests in the 1950s. After that, the base fell into disuse. Recently, however, experts have rediscovered Woomera. They say it's a perfect spot to launch rockets and even satellites over the southern hemisphere. Already, there are plans next year for a joint venture with Russia to develop a commercial launch facility in Australia, and Japan plans to conduct tests for its new orbital launch vehicle at Woomera later in the year. In fact, after decades on the sidelines of the space race, one could say business at Woomera is definitely looking up. Riz Khan, CNN reporting.
South and eastern United States, the rain begins there, and we watch it all the way back across the north and west of Mexico. Some scattered storms here. At the same time, snow showers across parts of the Great Lakes region, Ontario, and then into the western provinces of Canada, north and western United States, a rain-snow mix there, snow in the mountains.
All good things have to come to an end, and this is how we started getting ready to come home, checking out the systems on the orbiter. Then it was time to close up the payload bay doors, say goodbye to the view out the window, and get ready to come home.
The entry was spectacular. Being a first-timer sitting up in the front, the orange-pink glow was just fantastic looking through the windows. This was a shot on entry taken from a guy in Denver on top of his house with his handycam and sent it to us. Anyway, we came around the hack shortly after sunrise, coming down the 18-degree glide slope at 300 knots. Sox just had the guidance nailed, doing a beautiful job. And it's very dynamic. It's like trying to land a bomb, because this is similar to a bombing profile that you'd fly in the Navy. I got the gear out at 300 feet. We came across the threshold right where we should have been, touchdown 2,500 feet down the runway. And the landing was so smooth, I'd like to take this chance to brag about Sox. And it's uncharacteristic of a Navy pilot, but this landing was so smooth. It was like on an airline landing, when the landing is so smooth, everybody in the cabin just claps and cheers. And in fact, that's what happened on our landing when we touched down. You could barely tell we'd touched down.
Ken had to do the most important thing on the mission, though, get the gear down, and you can see he did that successfully. Columbia was a beautiful vehicle. It was a little slow getting off the pad, but it was worth the wait, because when we got up there were very few problems. And it really proved itself to be a wonderful platform for science.
Ending successfully, tying the record, or just shy of the record for space shuttle duration missions. The 7-member crew returning to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where weather this morning was just fine for a landing. As you can see, the drag chute has deployed and a safe landing has concluded. Before this mission was launched into orbit, one NASA manager said it would be a bit like watching paint dry. And for those of us who aren't active in certain fields of science, Columbia's 6.6 million-mile marathon lived up to that advanced billing. While in orbit, the 7-member crew of Columbia worked in shifts around the clock in a $100 million microgravity laboratory. They grew 1,500 protein and semiconducting crystals, 5 small potatoes, and they watched how fluids and fires behave in space. The astronauts, led by Commander Ken Bowersox and payload commander Kathy Thornton, say they have come home with a lot of good samples for scientists to analyze. Scientists will be looking at those samples in the weeks and months ahead. Kind of a forerunner for the space station missions, which NASA hopes to begin by the year 2002. Once again, the Space Shuttle Columbia completing a 16-day mission in orbit successfully. The NASA astronauts are home at the Kennedy Space Center safe and sound, and will continue with our continuing coverage of CNN's efforts to get into and look at the death of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin after this break.
Mission elapsed time of 15 days, 21 hours, 52 minutes.
Amerikanische Shuttle zur Erde zurückgekehrt. Um 12:45 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit landete heute die Raumfähre Columbia in Cape Canaveral. Das Wetter hatte sich rechtzeitig gebessert, sodass die Rückkehr nicht, wie ursprünglich befürchtet, verschoben werden musste. In 16 Tagen legten die Astronauten der Columbia fast 11 Millionen Kilometer im All zurück. Die Forschungsreise war damit der zweitlängste Flug, der je von einem amerikanischen Shuttle zurückgelegt wurde.
Columbia ist nach einem knapp 16-tägigen Aufenthalt im All wieder auf die Erde zurückgekehrt. Pünktlich um 11:45 Uhr unserer Zeit landete das Shuttle sicher in Cape Canaveral im US-Bundesstaat Florida. Den 7 Astronauten, die fast 11 Millionen Kilometer zurückgelegt hatten, geht es gut. Im Mittelpunkt des Raumfluges standen Experimente zur Schwerelosigkeit, so zum Beispiel das Verhalten von Flüssigkeiten unter Weltraumbedingungen.
Fred, wir möchten gern von Ihnen hören, was Ihre Aufgaben da oben sind.
Wir mussten in einer 16-tägigen Expedition eine Reihe von Experimenten durchführen.
Um das Verhalten von Flüssigkeiten im All zu untersuchen.
Mit ein paar Bier könnte ich euch schon erklären, wie ihr euch nach so einer Flüssigkeit verhaltet.
Dann war unsere Mission wohl völlig überflüssig.
Vor dem Start habe ich der Crew eine Überraschung geschickt. Ein paar praktische Geschenke für die NASA. Einen Schraubenzieher, den ich erfunden habe, und ein paar klassische Tooltime-Videos.
Das konnten wir gut gebrauchen.
Wer hat den Schraubenzieher ausprobiert?
Das war ich, Tim. Ich habe ein Video davon, wie ich ihn benutzt habe.
Danke, Catherine. Heidi, lass mal sehen.
Ich gratuliere, Tim. Du hast den ersten intergalaktischen Drehwurm erfunden.
Wie hat euch denn unser Tooltime-Video gefallen?
Nach einem arbeitsreichen Tag haben wir wunderbar zu der Sendung schlafen können.
Sehen wir es uns doch mal an. Aha, die Episode mit dem Baustellenklo.
Ein gewisses Bedürfnis.
War ein tolles Schlafmittel, Tim.
Im All können Sie von mir aus den Commander spielen, Bauersocke, aber hier unten, da hab ich den Finger am Hebel. Ihr seid doch geschult, heikle Situationen zu meistern. Dann mal los. Wir sehen uns gleich wieder nach der Werbung von Winford.
From the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, this is Space Shuttle Columbia Launch Control. This situation is what's giving us some doubt that we may be not launching exactly on time at 9:50, but that there's still some time in the count before we get to that point, and we'll continue counting the clock down. All the work at Launch Pad 39B, as well as all operations here in Firing Room 3 of the Launch Control Center, is continuing as planned today. We're not working any serious technical issues or problems at this time, and we anticipate an on-time liftoff of the Shuttle Columbia and the 7-member crew from Kennedy Space Center in about 4.5 hours. Situated in Columbia's payload bay is the second U.S. microgravity laboratory, and on board that space lab, which is located in Columbia's payload bay, are the 19 experiments that will be used in dozens of investigations covering a variety of disciplines, including fluid physics, material science, combustion science, and biotechnology. This is Shuttle Launch Control at T-minus 3 hours and holding. We have just under an hour remaining in our built-in hold this morning. Currently, the final inspection team, which is formerly known as the Ice and Debris Inspection Team, are at the pad, and they are in the process of making a final survey of the vehicle. Commander Ken Bowersox is again suiting up for this attempt to launch today. He's being joined by his pilot, Kent Rominger, who is a highly decorated Navy pilot. Fred Leslie is one of our 2 payload specialists who will be flying today. He's making his first trip into space. Leslie holds a world record as a participant in the 200-person free fall formation as a skydiver. He's an avid skydiver. That occurred back in 1992. The crew members are being assisted with their launch and entry suits by suit technicians from both Kennedy Space Center and the Johnson Space Center. Michael Lopez Alegria was born in Madrid, Spain, grew up in California, and has been a naval aviator since 1981. Mission specialist Kathy Coleman, preparing to make her first trip into space today. She was born in South Carolina. Albert Sacco, one of our 2 payload specialists, born in Massachusetts. He'll be working with the crystal growth experiments aboard this space shuttle mission. This will be his first space flight. Payload commander, Catherine Thornton, the most experienced as far as space flight goes. This is she's preparing for her 4th flight today. She's been an astronaut since 1984, and she's flown on missions STS-73, STS-49, and she was a spacewalk specialist aboard STS-61, the Hubble Space Telescope servicing mission. This is Shuttle Launch Control, T-minus 3 hours in holding, and we have live TV coverage of our 7 crew members who will be flying aboard Space Shuttle Columbia this morning. Again, they're coming out of their crew quarters, getting onto the elevator, which will take them down to the Astrovan, which will then drive them out to Pad 39B. Commander Bowersox with Payload Commander Catherine Thornton, followed by the rest of their crew member preparing for their drive out to the pad and for their greatly anticipated launch today. At this point, it looks like our best opportunity is going to be the earliest opportunity, and we are right on track for preparing the vehicle and the crew for launch at the opening of the window at 9:50 a.m. This is Shuttle Launch Control at T-minus 2 hours, 43 minutes and counting. The crew has arrived at the pad, and they are in the process now of entering the vehicle. Commander Ken Bowersox is preparing for his third mission aboard Space Shuttle. Catherine Coleman, or Mission Specialist 1, is a captain in the Air Force and preparing for her first flight into space.
OTC, this is PS2. How do you read?
PS2, this is OTC. I read you loud and clear. How many?
At this time, Michael Lopez Alegria is preparing to board the vehicle. He will serve as the flight engineer on this mission.
CPVD, OTC.
DVD.
Step 665.
Copy.
Technically, with the vehicle, everything continues to go well today as the launch team works to finalize all aspects of preparation for the launch of Space Shuttle Columbia, which is still scheduled for 9:50 a.m. Eastern Time at the opening of a 2.5-hour window. At this time, the booster test conductor is verifying that the chamber pressure in the solid rocket motors is at appropriate levels. Also, initial air-to-ground voice checks have been completed between the crew and mission managers here in the firing room, and crew cabin closeouts are about to begin. The closeout crew has just been given the go-ahead to close the crew hatch and perform their cabin pressure leak checks.
CDR, OTC, perform ohms, GN2 press.
That's right.
PLT, OTC, perform water spray boiler, GN2 supply activation.
And OTC PLT, that's complete.
Thank you.
PLS is go for OAA retract.
We're in the process now of retracting the orbiter access arm that permits the crew to enter and depart from the orbiter Columbia. Everything continues to look good, and we're cleared for launch.
OTC PLT, caution warning memory cleared. No unexpected errors.
Copy that.
No problems are being reported from the crew.
Your visors and initiate O2 flow. This test team has worked really hard to get you to this point. It's your turn for a great 16-day mission.
We're closing our visors, and we can't wait to get to work.
And we have a go for auto sequence start. Columbia's onboard computers have primary control of all the vehicle's critical functions.
20.
T-minus 15 seconds. 12, 10, 9, 8, 7. We have a go for main engine start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the Space Shuttle Columbia, catapulting scientific knowledge through microgravity research.
We're in the royal, Houston.
Houston now controlling, Columbia underway on its 18th trip to space, rolling on course for a 172-mile high, 39-degree inclination orbit.
And well programmed, Houston.
Columbia now falling back to 2/3 throttle, prepare the spacecraft back to the area of maximum air pressure at supersonic 800 miles per hour, altitude 34,000 feet, 3 nautical miles downrange.
Columbia, go ahead, throttle up. Oh, we heard you that time, plane. Go ahead, throttle up.
3 main engines on Columbia now back at full throttle. Columbia is now airborne for 1.5 minutes. It's burned almost 2.25 million pounds of propellant already, weighing less than half of what it did at launch. 3 main engines on Columbia working well at full throttle. Good hydraulic systems, good electrical systems. Altitude now 100,000 feet, 14 miles downrange from the launch pad. Columbia traveling 2,800 miles per hour. Flight controllers are standing by for burnout and separation of the twin solid rocket first stage, upcoming in just about 8 seconds. Good solid rocket booster separation is confirmed. Columbia now on its 3 main engines, second stage. Altitude 185,000 feet, 38 nautical miles downrange from the launch pad. Columbia traveling at 3,500 miles per hour, continuing in a steep climb. This would be a good chance to do a 40 after payload goes too.
small gap that I'm talking about closing. You can maybe see it's between the top gray stopper and the two underneath that.
And Katie, that is the termination fluid. The top plunger and the center plunger would terminate, so we do not want to close that small gap.
Okay, good.
CGBA says we're in good shape.
Okay, it's steady. It's not rotating at all. Very, very little. Just a slight amount. You want to release it?
That's affirmative. Go ahead and release.
Okay, look up at me. Keep cleaning. I wish I could hold still. Taking a little time to play during our cleaning, are we?
Yeah.
And that's slot 8.
Space Lab Huntsville for Fred.
Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of things, Fred. We now have live downlink. We're seeing a good view. Is that
grading in slot 9, and if so, probably should be in slot 7.
Yeah, copy that. I think you're a little ahead of me, but I'm on my way.
Yeah, sorry about that, Fred. The other thing is we'd like an IR view, again, when you get there.
Okay, there you go. And I'm beginning step 9er. I might adjust one of the cameras for you a little bit, and I'll start at step 9er and go through some of the gradings per.
And Glenn, what about retrieving us there? Does that make sense?
It's pretty cool.
It's pretty neat, isn't it? It'll behave.
How big is that drop?
About 5 mils, probably about this big.
5 mils? What's a mil?
It's probably about an ounce. It's about this big. So they're just looking for an update on a 1 day later story. Is that right?
Do some zero-G stuff. Make something float.
Yeah, he did.
I was thinking more along the lines of, like, while you're working.
I guess so. I can tell you what I did. I'll be here. You can ask me questions.
This is Space Lab Operation Sundsville, and as Kathy Thornton continues to work with the drop physics module, Kent Rominger, the STS-73 pilot, now is in the module.
In Space Lab, this is Huntsville for Al. No need to reply. Just a heads up that you've got a TPR session in about 5 minutes.
Obviously, there's rather large effects from some of these changes, and in understanding what the result is going to be from particular changes, it's centered up again and reduce the motion.
You have a very uniform concentration of very small crystals, and I would say in the size range again of 10 to 20 microns maybe. But very small, very fine, and uniform from the cap to the bottom.
Copy that, Al.
Central Space Lab for DPM.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, I finished the procedure that you read up to me. The drive levels are set at 142 dB, and I think I'm ready to deploy.
DPM agrees, Kathy.
Okay.
Space Lab Huntsville for Fred.
Huntsville Space Lab for GFSC.
Go ahead, Fred.
Okay, I transferred scenario 191, and I started that at 1517. GN2 pressure currently is about 8.8. The status lights, OS and IS temp lights are on. IS temp just went out. So now all status lights are off except OS temp, TCG verifying normal, and the run light. And the top row of LEDs follows 33.6, 36.0, 34.3, 42.4.
Everybody's been doing a great job this afternoon.
Space Lab for STDCE. I've completed step 1-5. I'll set up for the next run, and I assume we want to change.
Working on an experiment called FSDC, fiber-supported vapor combustion. He's making these little things burn. You can see he's got a microscope and a monitor, and oh, it's very complex, and I'm sure it is.
Yeah, Fred, we copy, and you're go to proceed.
Copy that.
Yeah, we had a good run on the ground, Fred. Good job.
Okay, great.
What's up? You know, KT asked me what was next, and we just assumed that you guys wanted to load the fourth sample in that holder.
And that's a negative, Katie.
And sample 3, we have a uniform population of beautiful crystals, and I would guesstimate they're all about 20-25 microns. And it's uniform as best I can tell from the top to the bottom and from the center to the outside.
Space Lab Huntsville for Fred. When you start your increment again, I think what we'd like for you to do is cycle over to your other camera view where you can see the leftmost LED, which represents the difference in temperature between the wall and the heater element. And if you can adjust your increments so that you go up in 5-degree steps based on that that temperature reading, that would be ideal.
Okay, I understand you prefer 5-degree steps on the leftmost LED.
Good copy.
Well, Kathy, it's getting better and better, but let's try a couple more down.
It's F-32, that's all I have.
Okay, Kathy, that looks real good. And they've seen enough from this cell if you want to go ahead and move on to the next one.
In Space Lab Huntsville for Rommel, that we're receiving the downlink video. That looks pretty good.
Okay, Dave, I initially started out backlighting and then noticed the change that they wanted side lighting on it. So what I've actually done is done both. And the view you're looking at now is side lighting. And the view now is side and backlighting. And from up here, it looks like the combination of the two lighting is a better view, but I've been recording both. So the PI gets what he asked for, and then what, to me, looks a little bit better.
We always aim to please the customers, right?
And Huntsville Space Line, how do you like Cell 1 Charlie?
That looks great, Rommel.
Hey, recording.
Supply water dump at 440, and GFCC mod steps 1 and 2 will move to 430.
That's good, Sox. Looks like we're live on the flight deck with you, and I have the dump information if you're ready to copy.
You're ready to copy, call.
Okay. Let's see. This is going to be a time dump, 1 hour, 45 minutes. That is the limiting factor. We will set the low limit of take Bravo to 15%. So if you hear that alarm go off first, then you can terminate the dump. Otherwise, it'll be timed at 1 hour 45.
And Space Lab for Fred would like you to disturb the cell a little bit, and what we're trying to do is wet the entire base uniformly.
Okay, copy that. I understand you want to wet the bottom as much as we can.
Good copy.
Hello, Fred. How you doing back there? Copy that, Katie. And that's a good call on those tapes. We'll monitor the time and change them out.
Great.
What is that you're having for dinner? Or is it breakfast for you?
Say, breakfast tortilla.
You're killing us down here. It's the ZOE here in 13 seconds. We're all going to run for the refrigerator.
Hope you get something good out of there.
Behind him we have Old Glory, framed perfectly, except there's one of those whoopee pennants right above it.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Angie, we're going to head into the middeck and get dinner and get ready for bed because we don't have much time left up here. But I wanted to tell you and to all our friends at Huntsville and Marshall how much we have enjoyed working with you. For the time we started training a year and a half ago, we've appreciated your determination and your humor and particularly your patience with us. And we're happy to be part of the team that's made all this possible. Thanks. We'll see you on Earth.
Bye. Thanks a lot. We'll see you guys soon. It's a great couple weeks.
I think it's steak and potatoes for dinner tonight. And shrimp cocktail.
Have a safe landing, everyone.
This is Kennedy Space Center shuttle operations. We see our first glimpse of the crew back on the ground in their flight suits after taking off their launch and entry suits, and they look happy and smiling and glad to have their land legs back. Shaking hands with Launch Director Jim Harrington, posing for a quick picture in front of their vehicle that was their home for the past 2 weeks, giving thumbs up not only for the mission but for the operation of the vehicle itself, which performed with very, very few problems.